The gallows cast a long shadow across the dusty main street of Bandera, Texas, as Victoria Lawson stood with her hands bound behind her back, her once vibrant auburn hair now limp and tangled around her face. She had been given until dawn to make peace with her maker, accused of a murder she swore she didn't commit. Only one man believed her, a rancher with piercing blue eyes who'd ridden out of town the night before, promising to bring back the truth before the noose could tighten around her neck. The year was 1875, and justice in Bandera moved swiftly, especially when the victim was the mayor's only son. Jake Montgomery had been found dead behind the saloon 3 nights earlier, a knife buried in his chest and Victoria kneeling beside him, her hands covered in his blood. Despite her desperate claims of innocence, the townspeople wanted someone to pay, and the evidence against her seemed overwhelming. Victoria's eyes scanned the horizon as the first hints of light began to bleed into the sky. The sheriff stood beside her, his weathered face impassive but his eyes revealing a hint of regret. He'd known Victoria since she arrived in town 2 years ago to work as a schoolteacher. She was well-liked, educated, and had never caused any trouble. But the evidence was damning, and the mayor's grief had turned to vengeance that demanded satisfaction. "Time's almost up, Miss Lawson," Sheriff Williams said quietly. "I'm sorry it's come to this." Victoria lifted her chin, refusing to show fear even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Samuel will be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He promised. Samuel Valdez had been the only one to stand up for her at the hastily arranged trial. The rancher had argued passionately on her behalf, pointing out inconsistencies in the evidence that no one else wanted to see. When the judge announced the verdict, Samuel had stormed out of the courtroom, vowing to find the truth. "That Valdez boy always did have a soft spot for lost causes," muttered one of the deputies, just loud enough for Victoria to hear. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, trying to hold on to hope. Samuel was a man of his word, and if anyone could save her, it would be him. They had been dancing around their feelings for each other for months, sharing glances across the church on Sundays and brief conversations when he brought supplies into town. Now she might never have the chance to tell him how she felt. The crowd began to gather, their faces solemn in the growing light. Mayor Montgomery stood at the front, his eyes hard with grief and hatred. His son had been a known troublemaker, but few dared to mention that now. "Bring her up," the sheriff ordered, his voice heavy. Victoria's legs trembled as she climbed the wooden steps to the platform. The noose hung before her, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. She tried to pray, but the words stuck in her throat. The preacher stepped forward, Bible in hand, his expression grave as he began to read the last rites. Victoria barely heard him, her ears straining for the sound of hoofbeats. Miles away, Samuel Valdez pushed his exhausted horse harder than he ever had before. His body ached from riding all night, but determination kept him upright in the saddle. Sweat stung his eyes despite the cool night air, and his mount's sides heaved with effort. "Just a little farther, boy," he urged, patting the horse's lathered neck. "We're almost there." In his saddlebag was proof of Victoria's innocence and the identity of the real killer. Samuel had tracked the man to a small mining camp 30 miles west of Bandera, following a hunch and a trail of whispers. What he'd discovered had confirmed his suspicions, but convincing the mayor and the town would be another matter entirely. The horizon was beginning to lighten, and Samuel felt panic rise in his chest. Time was running out. Victoria's face flashed in his mind, her kind eyes, the way her lips curved when she smiled, the soft touch of her hand the one time he'd helped her down from a wagon. He couldn't fail her now. "Let's go, boy," he shouted, spurring his horse onward. Back in Bandera, the sheriff looked at his pocket watch, then at the mayor, who gave a curt nod. It was time. "Victoria Lawson, you have been found guilty of the murder of Jake Montgomery. Have you any last words before the sentence is carried out?" the sheriff asked formally. Victoria looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people she had taught, helped, and considered friends. How quickly they had turned against her. "I am innocent," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "And God knows it, even if you don't." The executioner moved forward to place the hood over her head. "Wait," Victoria cried. "Please, just wait, Samuel will come." The sheriff hesitated, glancing at the mayor who scowled and shook his head. "I'm sorry, Miss Lawson, we've waited long enough," the sheriff said. Just as the rough fabric of the hood descended over Victoria's eyes, plunging her into darkness, a commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. "Stop!" A voice rang out, hoarse with exhaustion but powerful in its command. "Stop the execution!" Victoria's heart leapt at the sound of Samuel's voice. The hood was yanked away, and she blinked in the growing light to see Samuel pushing his way through the crowd, dragging a man behind him. Both were covered in dust, and Samuel looked like he hadn't slept in days, but determination burned in his eyes. "Sheriff Williams." Samuel called out, his voice carrying across the square. "I've brought you the real killer of Jake Montgomery." The crowd murmured as Samuel forced a man to his knees in front of the gallows. Victoria recognized him as Ben Tucker, one of the hands from the mayor's own ranch. "What is the meaning of this?" Mayor Montgomery demanded, his face flushing with anger. Samuel stood straight, his hand firmly on Tucker's shoulder. "This man confessed to killing your son, Mayor. I have witnesses and proof." "It's a lie," Tucker spat, but his eyes darted nervously. Samuel reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a blood-stained shirt. "This is Tucker's shirt, hidden in his camp outside of town. And this," he produced a folded piece of paper, "is a promissory note signed by Jake Montgomery showing he owed Tucker over $200 from gambling debts." Sheriff Williams stepped forward, taking the items from Samuel's hands. "That's not enough there's more," Samuel interrupted. "I found 2 witnesses who saw Tucker arguing with Jake behind the saloon that night. They were too afraid to come forward because Tucker threatened them. I have their sworn statements here." He handed over another document, this one bearing signatures and the seal of a justice of the peace from the neighboring town. "And most importantly," Samuel continued, his voice dropping as he looked at Tucker, "he confessed to me last night. Told me everything when I tracked him down." Tucker lurched to his feet, hatred contorting his features. "You tricked me, Valdez. I was drunk. You were sober enough to describe exactly how you killed Jake when he refused to pay his debts," Samuel replied evenly. "Sober enough to explain how you saw Victoria coming to help and ran, leaving her to be blamed." The sheriff looked from the evidence in his hands to Tucker's face, which had drained of color. "Is this true, Ben?" Tucker's eyes darted wildly, looking for escape but seeing none. The crowd had formed a tight circle around them. "Jake was cheating me," he finally burst out. "He owed me money and laughed in my face, said his pa would make sure I never got a cent. I just wanted to scare him, but he came at me." A gasp went through the crowd. Mayor Montgomery staggered back as if struck, his face ashen. "Get her down from there," Sheriff Williams ordered, already moving to untie Victoria's hands. Samuel rushed up the steps, reaching Victoria before anyone else. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he helped remove the ropes from her wrists. "You came," Victoria whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You actually came." "I promised, didn't I?" Samuel replied softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I wouldn't let them hang an innocent woman." "Especially not one you have feelings for," Victoria ventured, hope blooming in her chest despite the ordeal she had just endured. A small smile tugged at Samuel's lips. "Especially not the woman I love," he confirmed, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Samuel helped Victoria down from the gallows, his arm supporting her when her legs threatened to give way. The crowd parted for them, many faces now showing shame rather than condemnation. Sheriff Williams cleared his throat. "Miss Lawson, on behalf of the town, I offer our sincere apologies." "You're free to go." Victoria nodded stiffly, still processing the rapid turn of events. Mayor Montgomery approached them, his proud bearing diminished by grief and shock. "Miss Lawson, I was blinded by my loss. I wanted someone to blame. I'm sorry." Victoria looked at the broken man before her and found that her anger was tempered by pity. "Your son didn't deserve to die, Mayor, and I am truly sorry for your loss, but I didn't deserve to hang for a crime I didn't commit." "No, you didn't," the mayor agreed quietly. "I hope someday you can forgive us. Forgive me." Victoria didn't answer. Forgiveness would take time if it came at all. "Let's get you somewhere quiet," Samuel murmured, leading her away from the dispersing crowd. The sheriff was already taking Tucker into custody, and the executioner was dismantling the gallows with visible relief. Samuel took Victoria to the small hotel on the edge of town. The proprietor, Mrs. Jennings, had tears in her eyes as she welcomed Victoria and immediately set about preparing a hot bath and a meal. "You need to rest," Samuel told Victoria as Mrs. Jennings led her to a room. "We can talk later." Victoria caught his hand before he could leave. "Don't go far," she pleaded. "I don't think I can bear to be alone right now." Samuel squeezed her hand gently. "I'll be right outside your door. I'm not going anywhere." After Victoria had bathed and eaten, she found herself sitting beside Samuel on the small porch of the hotel. The town seemed subdued, as if in collective shame over what had nearly happened. "How did you know it was Tucker?" Victoria asked, her voice still rough from emotion. Samuel leaned back in his chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "I didn't at first. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. Jake had a reputation as a gambler, and I started asking questions about who he might have owed money to. One name kept coming up, Ben Tucker. And you just rode out to find him, alone," Victoria marveled. "What choice did I have?" No one else was willing to look beyond what seemed obvious. Samuel's face darkened at the memory. "When I found him, he was packing to leave the territory. He tried to run, but I convinced him it would be better to come clean." "Convinced him how?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. Samuel's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Let's just say I can be persuasive when someone I care about is in danger." Victoria studied his face, the strong lines of his jaw, the stubble from days without shaving, the kindness in his eyes despite their weariness. "Why did you believe in me when no one else would?" Samuel turned to face her fully, taking her hand in his. "Because I know you, Victoria. I've watched you with the children at school, seen how you treat everyone with kindness and respect. You're not capable of murder." "That's not all of it, is it?" Victoria pressed gently. Samuel's eyes softened. "No, I've had feelings for you since you first came to town. I just never found the courage to tell you, and then suddenly I was facing the prospect of losing you forever." Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest. "I've had feelings for you too. I thought maybe you didn't notice me that way." "I noticed everything about you," Samuel admitted. "The way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're thinking, how your eyes light up when you talk about books. The kindness you show to everyone, even those who don't deserve it." Victoria leaned closer to him, suddenly aware of how precious this moment was, a moment she had nearly never experienced. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends," Samuel replied, his voice gentle. "Do you want to stay in Bandera? No one would blame you if you wanted to leave." Victoria considered this. The town had been quick to condemn her, but it had also been her home for 2 years. "I don't know yet, but I do know that wherever I go, I'd like it if you were part of my future." Samuel's smile was like sunrise breaking across his tired face. "That can certainly be arranged, Miss Lawson." In the days that followed, Victoria gradually began to rebuild her life. Many in town came to offer apologies, bringing food, flowers, and sincere regret. Some she forgave easily, others would take more time. The school board unanimously asked her to return to teaching, but Victoria requested time to consider her options. Samuel rarely left her side, except to tend to his ranch, and even then he made sure someone he trusted was nearby. The ordeal had left Victoria with nightmares and a wariness that hadn't been there before. A week after her near execution, Victoria sat with Samuel on the bank of the Mediner River, watching the water flow past. It was a peaceful spot, away from the prying eyes of the town. "I've been thinking," she said, plucking a wildflower from beside her. "Maybe I don't want to be the school teacher anymore." Samuel looked at her curiously. "What would you want to do instead?" "I'm not entirely sure," Victoria admitted, "but I know I want a fresh start. Somewhere I can look at people and not wonder if they once wanted to see me hang." Samuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My ranch is doing well. I've been thinking of expanding, maybe buying that property up north near the San Antonio River. It's good land, plenty of water, and far enough from Bandera that the past wouldn't follow you there." Victoria's heart skipped a beat at the implication. "Are you asking me to come with you, Mr. Valdez?" Samuel took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm asking for more than that, Victoria. I know it might seem sudden, but facing the prospect of losing you forever made me realize that life is too short for hesitation. I love you. I think I have since the first time I saw you teaching those children under the oak tree when the schoolhouse roof was leaking." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Samuel Valdez, are you proposing marriage to me?" "I am," he confirmed, his blue eyes serious. "Maybe it's too soon after everything you've been through, and if you need time, I understand. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'll be waiting." Victoria didn't need time to consider. The past week had shown her what truly mattered in life, and the man before her had proven his devotion in the most profound way possible. "Yes," she said simply, "I would be honored to be your wife." Samuel's face lit up with joy, and he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I don't have a ring yet," Samuel apologized, "but I promise to get you the finest one in San Antonio." Victoria shook her head. "I don't need a fancy ring. I just need you and the life we'll build together." Samuel helped Victoria to her feet, and they walked hand in hand along the riverbank, making plans for their future. They would marry in a month after Samuel had time to prepare the ranch for his bride. Victoria would finish the school term, giving the town time to find a replacement teacher. And then they would start fresh, building a life together away from the shadow of the gallows. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Bandera. Most offered congratulations, though some whispered that it was too soon after the tragedy. Victoria and Samuel paid little heed to the gossip, focusing instead on their preparations. Mayor Montgomery, still grieving his son but humbled by his mistake, offered them a wedding gift, a deed to 50 acres adjoining Samuel's ranch. At first, Victoria was reluctant to accept anything from the man who had been so quick to condemn her, but Samuel gently reminded her that forgiveness worked both ways. "He's trying to make amends in the only way he knows how," Samuel told her. "We don't have to forget what happened, but perhaps we can allow him this gesture." Victoria eventually agreed, recognizing the genuine remorse in the mayor's eyes when he presented the deed. As the wedding day approached, Victoria found herself healing more each day. The nightmares became less frequent, and she began to smile more easily. Samuel's steady presence was a balm to her spirit, his unwavering love giving her strength to face the future. They were married on a clear Saturday morning in May, beneath the same oak tree where Samuel had first fallen in love with Victoria. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with wildflowers decorating the makeshift altar and the gentle breeze carrying their vows across the rolling hills. Victoria wore a dress of pale blue silk that Samuel had ordered from San Antonio, and her auburn hair was crowned with a circlet of white blossoms. Samuel, usually seen in work clothes or riding gear, cut a handsome figure in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. After the ceremony, the entire town gathered for a celebration at Samuel's ranch. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and for one day at least, the past was set aside in favor of celebrating new beginnings. As the sun began to set, Samuel found Victoria sitting on the porch of what was now their home, watching the guests dance in the yard. "Happy, Mrs. Valdez?" he asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. Victoria smiled, the name still new and wonderful to her ears. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Valdez." Samuel brought her hand to his lips. "I made a vow today to cherish and protect you all the days of my life, and I intend to keep it." "You've already protected me in ways I can never repay," Victoria said softly. "You saved my life." "And you've given mine purpose," Samuel replied. "I'd say we're even." As night fell, the guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone at last. Samuel carried Victoria across the threshold of their home, both laughing at the traditional gesture, and set her gently on her feet in the main room. "Welcome home," he said, his voice husky with emotion. Victoria looked around at the house Samuel had prepared for her, noting the small touches he had added, knowing they would please her bookshelves filled with volumes he had ordered from as far away as Chicago. A piano in the corner that must have been difficult to transport to the ranch. Vases of fresh wildflowers on every available surface. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning back to face him. Samuel took her in his arms, his eyes reflecting the love that filled his heart. "You're perfect," he corrected, "and every day I get to spend with you is a gift I'll never take for granted." Their life together unfolded with the rhythm of the seasons. Victoria adapted quickly to ranch life, learning to ride better, to cook over a wood stove, and to manage the household while Samuel tended to the cattle and horses. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking about their day or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. Victoria discovered talents she hadn't known. She possessed a knack for breeding horses, an eye for spotting the best grazing land, and a head for business that complemented Samuel's practical ranching skills. Together, they expanded the ranch operations, gradually building a reputation for quality livestock that brought buyers from as far away as Kansas City. A year after their wedding, Victoria gave birth to their first child, a son they named William, after Samuel's father. The boy had Samuel's blue eyes and Victoria's auburn hair, and from the moment he arrived, he had both his parents wrapped around his tiny fingers. "He's going to be a handful," Samuel predicted, watching as Victoria nursed their son. "Look at that determination in his eyes, just like his mother." Victoria laughed softly. "I was thinking he looks more like his father, especially that stubborn set to his jaw." As William grew, the ranch prospered. Samuel hired more hands to help with the increasing workload, and they built a larger house to accommodate their growing family and frequent visitors. Victoria started a small school on the ranch for William and the children of the ranch hands, finding joy in teaching again in this new context. 3 years after William's birth, their daughter Elizabeth arrived, a delicate girl with her father's quiet strength and her mother's love of books. The family was complete, and Victoria sometimes marveled at how close she had come to never experiencing this happiness. News from Bandera occasionally reached them. Ben Tucker had been hanged for the murder of Jake Montgomery, maintaining to the end that he had never intended to kill the mayor's son. Mayor Montgomery himself had resigned his position and moved east to live with his sister, the memories in Bandera too painful to endure. 5 years after leaving Bandera, Victoria received a letter that brought the past rushing back. It was from Sheriff Williams, informing her that he was retiring and wanted to make peace with any regrets before he did so. "He was the one who arrested me," Victoria told Samuel as they sat together on the porch that evening, the letter in her hand. "But he was also kind to me during those days in the jail. He made sure I had food and blankets, and he listened when I proclaimed my innocence, even if he didn't believe me." Samuel studied his wife's face, seeing the conflict there. "Do you want to respond?" Victoria considered the question. "I think I do, not for his sake, but for mine. To show that I've moved beyond what happened and found happiness despite it all." Samuel nodded, understanding as always. "Then write to him. Tell him about our life here, about the children. Show him that justice prevailed in the end." Victoria did write, a long letter detailing the life she and Samuel had built together. She described William's mischievous nature and Elizabeth's sweet disposition, the success of the ranch, and the contentment she had found far from Bandera. She ended with forgiveness not just for the sheriff, but for herself, for the anger and resentment she had carried longer than she should have. The sheriff's response came a month later, filled with gratitude for her kindness and news of his own. He had fought to institute changes in how trials were conducted in Bandera County, ensuring that evidence was thoroughly examined and witnesses properly questioned before verdicts were reached. Victoria's case, he wrote, had changed him, making him realize that justice required more than simply following the letter of the law. "He's named the reforms after you," Victoria told Samuel, reading from the letter. "The Lawson protocols, he calls them." Samuel smiled, pride evident in his expression. Your legacy in Bandera will be justice, not injustice. That's fitting. As the years passed, the events in Bandera became a distant memory, overshadowed by the joy of watching their children grow and the satisfaction of building something lasting together. William, at 15, was already showing signs of becoming an excellent rancher, with his father's affinity for horses and his mother's quick mind. Elizabeth, at 12, was devouring books faster than Victoria could order them, and displaying a talent for numbers that suggested she might one day take over the business side of the ranch operations. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Victoria with a trip to San Francisco, something she had always dreamed of but never expected to experience. They left the children in the capable hands of their foreman and his wife, and traveled by train across the country, marveling at the changing landscapes and the bustling cities along the way. In San Francisco, they stayed in a grand hotel overlooking the bay, ate in fine restaurants, attended the theater, and walked hand in hand along the waterfront. It was a world away from their life on the ranch, and they savored every moment of it. On their last night in the city, they stood on the balcony of their hotel room, watching the lights reflect on the water. "Thank you for this," Victoria said, leaning into Samuel's embrace. "It's been a wonderful adventure. We've had quite a few of those, haven't we?" Samuel replied, his arm tightening around her waist. "Beginning with that night, I rode back to Bandera with Tucker in tow." Victoria turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved so dearly, now lined with the years but still as handsome to her as ever. "That wasn't the beginning," she corrected. "Just the moment when our story took a turn toward happiness instead of tragedy." Samuel brushed a strand of hair, now streaked with silver, from her face. "I've never regretted a single day with you, Victoria Valdez." "Nor I with you," she replied, stretching up to kiss him. "And I look forward to many more years of adventure together." When they returned to the ranch, they found everything in perfect order, though both children had clearly missed them terribly. William had a new horse to show his father, one he had trained himself during their absence, and Elizabeth had composed a song on the piano to welcome her mother home. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythm, but with a renewed appreciation for the blessings they had been given. Victoria often thought about how differently her life might have turned out if Samuel hadn't believed in her innocence, hadn't ridden through the night to bring back the real killer. She might never have seen her children's faces, never known the depth of love she shared with Samuel, never experienced the satisfaction of building a life filled with purpose and joy. As William and Elizabeth grew into adulthood, they too found their own paths. William took over more responsibility on the ranch, eventually marrying the daughter of a neighboring rancher and building a house on the property for his own family. Elizabeth surprised them by announcing she wanted to study medicine, and with her parents' full support, she became one of the first female doctors in the state, returning to establish a practice that served the ranching families in the area. Victoria and Samuel grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and floods, boom years and lean ones, always finding strength in each other. Their home became a gathering place for family and friends, filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of shared lives. On their 40th anniversary, with their children, grandchildren, and half the county in attendance, Samuel presented Victoria with a gift, a small wooden box containing the frayed rope that had once been meant for her hanging. "Why did you keep this?" Victoria asked, surprised and a little shaken by the sight of it. "To remind me," Samuel said simply, "of how close I came to losing you and how precious every day since has been." Victoria closed the box and set it aside, taking Samuel's hands in hers. "We don't need reminders anymore, my love. We've built a life so full that there's no room for old sorrows." Samuel nodded, understanding as always. Together they walked out to where their grandchildren played, 5 strong, healthy children who would never know how close their grandmother had come to dying before their parents were even born. That night, after the celebrations had ended and the guests had gone home, Victoria and Samuel sat on their porch as they had done countless times before, watching the stars emerge in the Texas sky. "You ever regret staying in Texas?" Samuel asked suddenly. "We could have gone anywhere after we married, San Francisco perhaps, or even back east." Victoria squeezed his hand, her answer coming without hesitation. "Never. This land gave me you, gave us our children, our home. Everything I love is here." Samuel smiled, the love of 40 years shining in his eyes. "You know, that first morning when I saw you standing on those gallows, I made 2 promises to myself. The first was that I would never let anything harm you again. And the second," Victoria prompted when he fell silent, "that I would spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you made me the moment you said you'd be my wife." Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. "You've kept both promises admirably, Samuel Valdez." As the night deepened around them, they remained on the porch, 2 souls entwined by love, trial, and triumph. The young schoolteacher and the determined rancher had become partners in every sense, their lives a testament to the power of belief and the endurance of love. What had begun in the shadow of a gallows had blossomed into a lifetime of happiness, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope could ride in with the dawn. And though Victoria never returned to Bandera, she had long ago made peace with what happened there. The town that had nearly taken her life had inadvertently given her the greatest gift: the love of a man who believed in her when no one else would, who had ridden through the night to save her, and who had spent every day since showing her that love was the truest form of justice.